Let's start. Hello everyone, my name is Jimmy, and today we're going to talk about wiring up some of these Lamphus Strobe LED 12 volt lights. This is their 3-watt model. I've installed a few different styles of these. The reason I'm making this video is because I was looking for this video when I first started messing around with these. Wasn't really able to find anything. Once I did it a few times, I figured I'd make a video to kind of help people out here. So, you know, let's talk about you might be installing strobes for your vehicle for I don't know, a plethora of reasons. For me, my two reasons are both of my occupations. One is I work in construction. I park in my pickup truck on the side of the highway all the time. Construction sites, towing stuff, snow removal, etc., etc. Most municipalities, especially with snow removal and parking on the side of the highway, require you to have an amber strobe. They've got their own sort of, you know, their own guidelines on what you should be doing and how many and whatnot. And the other reason is I work in EMS. I'm an EMT, actually in paramedic school right now. And I work in a few different areas where sometimes we are responding from home, in which case, depending on the municipality, you'll usually run in blue strobes or red strobes. It's kind of interesting because the places where you run blue, if you run red, you are going to jail. Areas where you run red, if you run blue, you're going to jail. There's certain, you know, obviously you never want to be coming close to even thinking about impersonating a police officer or anything like that, but these are important things. They sell these lights in all different colors. I know that there's other colors for different things, for towing and, you know, blah 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 blah. But anyways, you've got your own reasons for running these, so I'd figure we'd talk about it a little bit. Gonna kind of go over the things you would need to do any of this kind of work, some recommended tools and little trinkets and such. One thing that you're going to want in terms of tools, you're going to need your normal electrical stuff, little side cutters, scissors, crimpers, wire strippers. These things are kind of nice. Going to need a heat source for doing heat shrink stuff. Torch works. I prefer a heat gun, but this also works. I have a heat gun, but you gotta plug it in, and it's not always easy to work on a vehicle with it because it's kind of unwieldy. Some heat shrink, obviously, it comes in all different kinds. I suggest not cheaping out on this kind of stuff. Same with little butt connectors. We've got both the solder kind and the crimp kind that both then heat shrink onto the wire. We're gonna go over how to use that kind of stuff. They also make ones that aren't insulated. These are just end connectors, not butt connectors, but you would use it in parallel with a little bit of heat shrink like that. That's all good stuff. These are some different kinds of wire connectors. This is a Deutsch style, I believe it's pronounced. This is a 2-wire, this is a 4-wire. They make them in all different ways. This is kind of an automotive standard, especially for off-road wiring. I also like these circular ones, because although I guess this is a 16 American wire gauge, I believe it's 16. These are great for high, bigger lights and such. These don't need all that many amps, and the wires are already 22 American wire gauge coming off of these things. These connectors also, this is the big benefit for me, is usually I'm flush mounting a light like this onto a bumper, and I need to drill a hole to pass this wire through the back. And if you are drilling a hole to fit something like this through, and this is just a 4-wire, not even a 5-wire, and these are 5 wires, you end up drilling a really big hole and also having to, kind of square out the inside, broach it out so that you can fit one of these connectors through. These fit through a lot easier. I believe this is like a 5/8 hole, goes right through, and then you don't end up having to drill a hole bigger than the actual light itself to run one of these connectors through. I'll show you how to do this as well, but these are ones that I've already sort of wired one of these connectors right onto the light. So we will talk about that. And some other stuff, fuse blocks, stuff like that. You know, everyone's application is going to be different. I'll touch a little bit on different ways to power these lights, but we're mainly going to be talking about the connections at the light itself. Recommend getting a bunch of good quality wire for the purpose. This is 4-wire. You would want probably 5-wire depending on what function of these lights. These ones where they are going aren't going to be utilizing the constant on feature, which is the white wire on here, so I don't need to worry about that one. And then also, you know, this is just 2-wire. If you were just doing the strobe, whatever. Make sure you don't cheap out on this. Make sure it is not, make sure it's rated for outdoor use. Make sure you're not just using speaker wire, something like that. And some switches, little add-a-fuse. These things are nice if you don't really feel comfortable jumping into certain circuits and triggers for relays and stuff like that. These are good to have. Little grommets, you're passing wire through something. You don't want this rubbing up on something sharp on the frame and then ending up, you know, cutting itself open. A little test light. I also here will be using a battery with some alligator clips for some bench testing to show you some things. I guess that's about it, besides just the general electrical 12-volt stuff. You know, one of the reasons you might not want to take this on at home is because starting a project like this does usually end up requiring a bunch of little random things, and until you've done it a few times and just collected things from other projects, you usually find yourself in a pickle where you don't have exactly what you need. Once you've done it enough, you kind of just have one of everything. So let's go from there. All right, so let's talk about the wiring for these. Now we're gonna start with just one light so we can kind of go through what these different wires do, and then we'll move on to linking multiples together. Keep in mind, every brand is gonna be specific on what these colors mean. This is for Lamphus. This is their NanoFlare, and it even is specific to the size of these. This is the 3-watt. I believe they make a 4 and a 6, and I think it actually ends up going off of the amount of bulbs. So the 3 watts, 3 bulbs, 5 watt, 6 watts, 6 bulbs. You can get these in just one solid color, or half and half. So when they do their different patterns, they're going between 2 different colors. But they all kind of work the same. I know once you go to, I believe, the 4-watt, there's more patterns available for you to go through with the different strobe functions and such. Yeah, so we'll start simply with just the red and the black. So the black here is always going to be your ground, and then the red is going to be your hot, and this is for the normal strobe functions. Just, you know, this is what you're going to power on and off. You can obviously ground this to somewhere on the chassis, to one of the mounts or whatever. I like to run everything back to where I'm getting power from, so it's all in one place. I can check on it. I'm not searching for bad grounds. It keeps everything kind of together. So we'll start with ground, and this is just a motorcycle battery, some alligator clips. If you do this kind of stuff enough, I recommend getting some stuff like this just to do some bench testing, so you can kind of do some little tests yourself if you're curious about the configuration of something like this. And obviously also go off of the owner's manual for any of this kind of stuff. The one that comes with these lights isn't that good, but on the packaging there's a QR code that just pulls you to the PDF, and kind of is pretty simple there. But one of the reasons I made this video is because there was some stuff in there where I wish there was a better write-up on some of the intricacies of doing this kind of stuff. So anyways, we'll connect that, and boom, we've got our little strobe there. And then your yellow wire is going to be for connecting multiple lights together so that they can be synced up or alternate or whatever the patterns that you select. is. The white is going to be for constant output, and the blue is going to be the one that you tap to ground to change to the next pattern. So I'll show you that here. So we're going to take the blue, touch it to ground for, I think it just says, 1 to 3 seconds. I won't do that again because the next one, oh, that one's off. I think this light has like 30 different options, and like I said, the other models have even more. So you could theoretically set this up the way that you want the light to be while bench testing it, and then not worry about having to use this blue wire. I know some people will wire these to a switch if they want to be able to change, go through the functions like a momentary switch, go through different strobe patterns once it's installed. I don't really ever have a use for that. I don't really, whatever. But I do keep this kind of wired in, so I can do this if I need to. And then I think you hold this for 3 to 5 seconds, and 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep, and then it goes to solid. I think 5 to 10 seconds, it will go off and then kind of start over. Let's see. Yep, there. And then if you were to disconnect it from power and then reconnect. Oh, no, we still got to touch it again. Yeah. Okay, so that's kind of how you would be doing this, talking about just one at a time. Now, if you go straight to the white, it's always going to be just the constant output. For the strobes that I have on the back of my truck, I also have this wired in on the brake lights because I have 2 strobes like this that are yellow and white, so it has a pretty common output, and these 2 strobes are kind of right by the license plate, and it just comes on. When I throw it in reverse, I tapped into the brake light, so that was pretty easy. So now let's talk about linking these together. So I'll take that off. So here we have a second light. Now, if we just connected them together with just the power, I'm pretty sure these are going to be on different banks or different strobe settings. Let's see here. Patterns is the word I was looking for. Okay, so we'll give some ground, and then we'll just pull the red. Let's hear the hot. Kind of spin these together. So as you can see, they're 2 different patterns, and they are not synced up because we are not utilizing the yellow wires at this time. It's kind of hard to see. Let's pull everything off to the side. Now, if you for whatever reason you just didn't have them synced or didn't want to sync them or whatever, you can then take one of the blue wires, touch it to ground, and now we were advancing the pattern for just the one light, as you can see here. So now we will put the syncs together here. This is going to be the yellow cable. Now this part actually kind of confused me for a while, and that is, if you have 2 lights synced together with a sync cable, do you need to connect the blue wire, the advance wire? And I believe the answer is yes. I've done this a few times. That's why we kind of test. That's why we do this kind of stuff. So let's see. So let's not link those together right now, and let's just turn this on and see if they kind of automatically are synced because we got the yellow. So I know it looks kind of like they're synced, but they're not. If we put just one blue, no. I don't think so. So let's see if I actually put this to steady. Yeah, so do need to keep these together. So let's put them back to solid. And now, actually, let's try this. If we do separate this and they are already on the same bank, let's pretend we didn't mess around with anything yet. Let's see what happens. Let's just take one and put it to ground. Yep, so it's still only doing one. All right. Let's connect these together again. And put them to solid, so we're holding that for 3 to 5 seconds. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and now, this is kind of the magic. Now we are doing a pattern. And like I said, with these smaller 3-watt ones, I don't think they do an alternating pattern, like a wig-wag. Could be wrong, but that is something you get with the bigger patterns, with the bigger lights. So we're just touching these wires to ground. It's almost annoying how many settings these have, and like I said, these don't have as many as some of the other models, but it's like, I don't know. Yeah, so anyways, and then back to the whites as the constant. All right. All right, so let's talk about wiring up some connectors onto these. We're gonna be using these little 5-pin ones. They are 22 gauge. They're from Amazon. I do like these ones better for this application than like the normal Deutsch style. This is a 4-pin. This is 5. You can see the difference in just sort of how big they are in terms of getting them through a hole. So if you're gonna flush mount this onto something, you wanna be able to feed this through. I've done it with these, but you end up drilling like a 3/4 inch hole and then having to go in there with a file to make it square to fit it through. And then at the time it's all done, it's about the same sort of size as this. So you end up with this giant hole that you're trying to go through. It's hard to kind of cover it up. These little circular ones are good. Also make sure that whatever you're getting is waterproof and rated for outdoor and automotive stuff like that. These are, the colors are a little bit different here. I think the main difference is there's a green instead of a white. Kind of just have to keep that in mind. So one thing we're gonna do here is we're gonna strip these back a little bit further than they come, just so that we have enough bare wire to get some purchase on. Everyone kind of has their own preference on wire strippers. I also like these kinds. Sometimes if you don't have enough wire to work with, it's kind of hard to get in there with these, but they all, even when you get Nipix ones, like good ones, I feel like these things wear out after a little bit. The blades bend, usually because you kind of end up trying to use them on things that are a little bit bigger wire bigger than what they want. So we're gonna come in here, and then we'll take a look at this light. We'll say these are good. One of the big things that usually we'll find that you mess up with when you're doing stuff like this is forgetting to put on heat shrink before you start putting stuff together. If we were to connect these with a bunch of these little solder butt connectors, these little crimp ones, you start doing that and you don't put this on, there's really, you can try to get over something like this with, sometimes there's, bigger pieces of heat shrink, but usually you have to do some planning ahead. Same thing with doing any kind of like wire loom and stuff like that. So we'll do this one with these style of connectors. Don't get the cheapest ones. You don't have to spend a ton on these, but you want to get ones that have the built-in heat shrink with the butt connector. I know that sometimes you'll see stuff that looks like some older ones. Anything that looks like this feels like it's just made of just plastic. There's really no point to even have this. It makes it harder to crimp it, and then you have this little piece of like protection, but it usually falls off and it doesn't shrink, it doesn't seal anything, it doesn't help hold anything. I guess it's just sort of cosmetic. Yeah. Alternatively, you could use, connectors, butt style connectors like this, and then make sure you heat shrink each one individually. I like using these ones because of the fact that they kind of self-seal themselves up. You can use these kind of crimpers, you can use these kind. The issue with these are usually nice, but sometimes they are just a little bit too big if you're doing this on the car. So we'll get some of these. And obviously pay attention to what gauge they are rated for. These are 22 to 16 gauge. This is all 22 gauge wiring, so these are just, they work perfectly. You probably could go with one a little bit smaller, I would assume. I don't really see stuff much smaller than this for automotive wiring, just because there's really no use to be doing 22 gauge, anything smaller than 22 gauge on a vehicle. Yeah, so this is pretty easy. Come in here. If you're using something like this, make sure you're using the corresponding correct size. You won't get a complete connection if you don't do that. Make sure it's all the way in there where it needs to be. As you're doing these, sometimes it helps to heat shrink them as you go, just because it's a little bit better access. Heat guns are nice. I prefer to use a heat gun. I've been actually meaning to buy a cordless one just to make things a little bit quicker and not have to worry about running an extension cord everywhere. I live in the city. I don't live out of a garage right now. I usually am working in the street. If I can get a parking spot in front of my house, I can run an extension cord out, run the heat gun. Alternatively, use a little lighter. The problem with these is it's really easy to overdo it. You can get too hot, you can melt the wire, you can burn the wire. So you just gotta be a little bit careful with these. So basically you wanna keep it moving. Also keep in mind, it's actually, the hottest part of this is not as close to the lighter as you can go, but it's actually the tip of that blue flame, the little point there. That's where things get really hot. So you wanna kinda keep this moving and avoid the cable. You'll see once it starts to, once it's done, there's like a glue inside of there that'll, you'll actually be able to see it make a full seal against the wire. all the insulation of the wire. So I like to do this first because inevitably, as you start changing lights around and moving stuff around, you're redoing wiring, you change your bumper, something like that, you're gonna find that if you don't put a connector like this in, you're gonna have to cut this and then crimp them on. And I've got lights that there's just a little bit left because you've done that. If you start off by doing this right the first time and then putting on a connector that you can reuse and disconnect, that kind of saves you money and time down the line because you don't have to cut stuff out and start from scratch. After you do this, you want to give them a little tug, make sure that they're all on there. Better to find this out now than have to deal with it later. At this point as well, you're going to kind of want to make sure that whatever heat shrink you're about to use can actually fit over all these things. Now, once we do heat these up, they will get smaller, and I think we're going to be able to squeeze them all in there. The fact that these sides are still open is going to make it so we can't really get this on. They sell heat shrink in all different sizes and amounts that it shrinks, 4:1, 3:1. Another thing here that you really don't want to cheap out on, a lot of things, like if you buy packs of connectors and stuff, little cheap things on Amazon, a lot of times it'll come with a bunch of heat shrink, big pack of like 1,000 of these things. Sometimes it's fine. I don't mind using stuff like this if it's going to be within another piece of heat shrink to kind of keep it, kind of contained in there. But the ones you want have like a really good glue in the inside of them. And you heat it out, you see it like start pouring out of the ends. The good stuff doesn't cost that much more, and it definitely is important. You don't want any of this to end up rubbing through and becoming exposed. That's how you burn your car down. You don't want that. So now we're gonna grab the other side here. I'm realizing that I'm gonna want a little bit more room to get on here. So another thing we're gonna do here is we're gonna strip this back, but we're also gonna strip back this main kind of cable insulator. This is not super easy. It becomes easier with a pair of these, a really good pair of like electrician's scissors. This sort of rounded out area helps you kind of get on there, and you just give a little pressure and kind of twist the wire. And you don't even want to cut all the way through it. You want to just get enough so if you start to bend it there, you can see it start to kind of tear and pull. Just like that. There it is. And then kind of work that off. And then take a look, because it's easy to cut through this and then nick one of these wires, and then you are SOL. You don't want that. A lot of times this is covered in some sort of little powder, I guess, to keep things dry and help them, I don't know, sometimes in the process trying to keep it from all sticking together. Try and get off that as much as you can before you start using the heat shrink. I would assume that it's not beneficial for this connection. For this here, we have, where's the other half of this connector? Yeah, so the way these work is they, not this side, this side. They kind of get your 5 pins in there. They index together, so you kind of push together and just wait, keep spinning it until it, there it is. You can see we've got a little O-ring, so it kind of keeps everything watertight. And this little screw on here. Now, we don't have to make sure this little nut is on this side, because we're gonna put this side closer to the light, and that's just because this side is smaller because it doesn't have to, because it doesn't have a nut. If we were to do this and then we had to push this through a penetration in the bumper, this would also have to pass through. We'd like to drill the smallest size that, smallest size possible. So that's going to be on this side, and this will be on the back side of the bumper, or whatever we're mounting to, and then we'll be using this. This is the part where you need to make sure you have your heat shrink ready, and also you're going to want to take a look and kind of visualize it and make sure that the heat shrink's going to be able to cover everything. Ideally, you want to be able to get back onto the outer insulation so that it can seal to that, and then you don't have to worry about any moisture getting in here. Once you start getting corrosion in any sort of electrical fitting, it kind of spreads through the cable just like cancer, and then it ends up, then you have a bad ground or a bad power, and you can't figure out why it's not working. You're checking fuses, you can't figure it out, and finally you tear it apart and you see that they call it the green death. So we're gonna avoid that by all costs. The other thing that is easier to do now than later is make sure that the little gasket seal is gonna be on there now. You could cut this, or you could try and stretch it over. Later, it's more difficult, and you know they don't ship extras when you buy lights like this. I have been known to make my own out of sheets of rubber if I lost one and I really need it. These actually end up being much more important than people realize. It's not because you're really trying to create a weatherproof seal for the light's sake, but you want to make sure that you're insulating this aluminum light from whatever you're mounting it against. Mainly if it's something steel, what you end up having is galvanic corrosion, dissimilar metals. You can start seeing oxidation on this way sooner, and your bumper as well. I actually just repainted a bunch of these because it was on a project where it had these and they got corroded, and taking these things apart and trying to mask them off and seal and take the lenses out, it sort of ends up being more work than it's worth. But I was bored, so I did that. So anyways, make sure you have that on there. Make sure all this is good. And then we're gonna start looking at this. And then also, yeah, like I said, it's so easy to forget putting this heat shrink on. Put that in there. And just make sure you got enough room to pull this out of the way so that it's not getting heat shrunk when you're doing these connections. Okay, so like I said, color's a little bit different here. We've got a, you know, I guess it is the white, and the white is gonna be now the green. We'll start with that one. I'll show you the other kind of wire crimper here. Yeah. You know, they sell something, I think it's called a third hand or something. It's like a bunch of clamps that you can kind of like, they have, you know, little alligator clamps on weights with little arms that, you know, you can have things, you know, they're really used for soldering. You should probably have one of those. They make working on this kind of stuff a lot easier. So just kind of squeeze it together. Got two little settings here, two different areas, one for this insulated connector and then one for bare, which would be these sorts of things. Yeah, anyways, got that on. And just take your time with this, because if you mess it up and you have to start over, you start running out of wire if you have to cut down in here. So the order in which you do these doesn't matter too much, but you just want to make sure that you're not having to cross over everything. So sort of pull them apart and line them up so that you don't kind of make a big rat's nest here. And also make sure these are all kind of going in at the same length, so that for the same reason, so they kind of lay, you know, kind of perfectly like that when you're done. Switch back to these. Now, I usually like to let this sit for a minute or two before I slide the heat shrink over and do that, just because this is still hot and it'll stick to that heat shrink and might get stuck halfway. So let that sit for a second. I get that it's a sort of a money thing why lights like this don't always ship with a connector already built on, like a little, you just sell it as a pigtail. But I would save people a lot of time and energy if they just ship this out. Obviously you don't have to install like this. I've done installs like this on vehicles before, just straight wired it in, no connectors, and that's fine if it's going to be a, you know, sort of a, you don't think you're ever going to have to take it off. But in the world of off-road and vehicle modification stuff that I do a lot of, I'm always finding myself needing to do this. For example, I live in New England where there's tons of road salt, and I recently had to take everything off my front bumper and sand it all down and repaint it, because it was actually an aluminum off-road bumper, but it was fully corroded and had all kinds of oxidation, and I had to repaint the whole thing. And obviously these were, you know, surface mount on there, and I didn't want to just mask them off. I wanted to take them out and, you know, move them out of the way, and I had to cut a bunch of them. So that's actually one of the reasons we're doing this install here, is because I needed new ones, because I ended up having to just cut them, and then I tried to repaint them, and they were too far gone. I'm gonna do a second one of these, but I'll do it with the other style connector. We'll kind of show you how those work. So we'll get another one of these, get another light. Once you've done this a few times, like by that I mean installing lights and stuff on cars or wiring anything, you just kind of end up building an entire collection of connectors and wire and extra old things that you didn't think you didn't want to throw out, so you kept, but it's like, you know, some shitty old light or, you know, something like that, and you just end up kind of having everything you might need one day, but you just end up kind of carrying this shit around with you for a long time, for better or worse. See, that one kind of pulled out. I don't like these as much. They're harder to do with, you know, two hands, and like I said, if you had a one of these little helper hand clampy thingy doodles, it'd probably help you out. If you're wondering where to get a lighter like this, just ask any friends you know that smoke a ton of weed, because they love these things for their dab rigs. They make smaller ones too. These work a lot better than just a normal lighter, because it's a more direct little point of heat there, so you can see me getting really close to my hands here, and I haven't yet to burn myself today. Now, if I had a little more wire to work with here, I'd slide this down further and then actually kind of twist the wires together to get a more positive contact. But since this is such low amperage, there's not a ton of power going through these little wires, and there's a pretty big glob of solder in there that kind of glues everything together. See how a little bit at a time. If you keep this thing on here for too long, it will burn. Yeah. There's a nice visual confirmation though. When it finally wets out the solder, you can see it spread out along the wire. People will argue all day long if these are better or worse than the regular crimp style ones. I think at the end of the day, it really comes down to your quality of work on whatever one you're actually using, and making sure you're not making stupid decisions other places in the process. Check, make sure everything looks good. See how these solder type, after you heat them up and they do their thing, they do get a little bit smaller than the other styles, so it's easier to get heat shrink over top of them. Before I forget, this is something I didn't notice the first couple times I installed these, is that this here is some sort of pressure relief seal, drain, something, this little hole here. I'm not sure what the word would be. But you can see in the machining of it, there is a pathway for, I guess, as a drain, or a vent, I guess is the correct word, it's a pressure vent. And I don't know if you can see this, but it goes out the one way. So you would always want to make sure if you're mounting this horizontally, you're mounting that down, or vertically, you're mounting that side down, because you don't want the possibility of water to get back in there and kind of back up on this thing. I didn't see this anywhere in the instructions or anything like that, so there's just something after looking at these things for a while, I was like, that's pretty interesting. Not sure why it doesn't talk about that, because it does seem kind of critical. You wouldn't want moisture to have a way in there, so. Okay, so now we're going to get to mounting these up. Sort of pick a location that makes the most sense for you. As you can see, kind of have mine kind of center mounted here at an angle. Use the masking tape to protect the paint. Funny enough, I think when I pulled this tape off, I actually pulled some of the spray paint off with it. Not ideal. You're going to want to make sure that behind where you're going to put this, you're not drilling through into anything important, and that you have access if you need to get your fingers back there to put a little bolt and nut to hold everything down. You're going to want to make sure you have an area from this place to run your wires also, and where, kind of think that stuff out. I'm using a little cardboard gasket here to kind of figure out where the mounting holes are. Alternatively, you could use the gasket. I made a little template here. So as you can see here, those other strobes that are up there, that is my blue strobes. I've got some fog lights in there and a light bar behind the grill. Also, you can see the winch back there. You'll see here using a step drill bit. These things are super nice for drilling through metal. They make it easy to sort of incrementally get things bigger until you're at the size that you want. Also, you'll see that a little Dremel there, always a good thing to have. Also, for the holes, there is one of those drill bits that has the built-in tap. Big fan of those. You can also drill the holes out a little bigger and then just a regular nut and bolt. But like I said, it's a little bit trickier to kind of get those in there. So kind of figuring out everything here, tighten it up, final fitment, make sure the gasket's right. Now we're on to wiring what you would call like the harness. So I'm going to take these two connectors and pull them together and wire them so everything can get there where they need to go. Wiring the two yellow sync cables together, but not running that wire back to the power source. Also what is now the green wire for the illumination, which was the white wire on the main harness. Just cutting that back and not using that and making sure that's not exposed to the elements. I did wire those to the little connectors in case I want to use these somewhere else and I have access to that. I don't want to cut that off before the connector. As you can see, this is actually probably way easier to do inside. So if you can kind of, in your garage or whatever, if you take the measurements, kind of doing this somewhere where you have a better working space than right out in front of your house, that's definitely the better way to do it. Obviously, lots of heat shrink. You really want to make sure you seal this stuff up. The front of the car there gets all the corrosion. Here we're running the wire up towards the. I use an S pod. It's called for the switching and the power source here. Don't wire tie or zip tie any of this stuff together until the very end. You want to make sure that everything's right before you kind of organize it all. Here I am kind of putting these little spade connectors on. If you want to wire these to a switch inside, you can do that with a relay. That also is a big fan. Here we are. You can see the little switch. Try these out here. That runs a little wire up to this power module, the S-Pod, and boom. Nice little pattern alternating there. And then also, I'll show you the ones that were already together in the back. These are the ones that are red, yellow and white. There it is.